Welcome to Simply Aunt Aggie. In this video, I'll be reading from the Nature Library, Birds, written by Neltje Blanchan and published in 1926. The birds I'll be reading about are the ruby-crowned and golden-crowned kinglets, the chickadee, the tufted titmouse, the white-breasted nuthatch, and the red-breasted nuthatch. The ruby-crowned kinglet. Length 4.25 to 4.5 inches, about 2 inches smaller than the English sparrow. Male, upper parts grayish olive green, brighter nearer the tail, wings and tail dusky, edged with yellowish olive, 2 whitish wing bars, breast and underneath a light yellowish gray. In the adult male, a vermilion spot on the crown of his ash-gray head. Female, similar but without the vermilion crest. Range, North America. Breeds from northern United States northward. Winters from southern limits of its breeding range to Central America and Mexico. Migrations, October, April. Rarely a winter resident at the north. Most common during its migrations. Count that a red-letter day on your calendar when first you see either this tiny, dainty sprite or his next of kin, the golden-crowned kinglet, fluttering, twinkling about the evergreens. In Republican America, we don't often have the chance to meet two crowned heads. Energetic as wrens, restless as warblers, and as perpetually looking for insect food, the kinglets flit with a sudden jerking motion from twig to twig among the trees and bushes, now on the lawn, now in the orchard, and presently in the hedgerow down the lane. They have a pretty trick of lifting and flitting their wings every little while. The bluebird and pine grosbeak have it too, but their much larger, trembling wings seem far less nervous. Happily, the kinglets are not at all shy. No bird is that is hatched out so far north that it never sees a human being until it travels southward to spend the winter. Alas, it is the birds that know us too well that are often the most afraid. When the leaves are turning crimson and russet and gold in the autumn, keep a sharp lookout for the plump little grayish olive-green birds that are even smaller than wrens and not very much larger than hummingbirds. Although members of a quite different family, the kinglets are not exclusive. They condescend to join the nuthatches and chickadees in the orchard, to help clean the farmer's fruit trees, or pick up a morsel at the free lunch counter in 0 weather. At this season, there is nothing in the kinglet's thin, metallic call note, like a vibrating wire, to indicate that when in love he is a fine songster. And love or war is necessary to make the king show us his crown. But vanity or anger is sufficient excuse for lifting the dark feathers that nearly conceal the beauty spot on the top of his head when the midget's mind is at ease. If you approach very near, and he will allow you to almost touch him, you may see the little patch of brilliant red feathers, it is true, but you will probably get an unexpected chattering scolding from the little king as he flies away. In the spring, his love song is as surprisingly strong in proportion to his size as the wren's. It seems impossible for such a volume of mellow, flute-like melody to pour from a throat so tiny. Before we have a chance to hear it again, the singer is off with his tiny queen to nest in some spruce tree beyond the Canadian border. The golden-crowned kinglet, similar to its next of kin, has a touch of orange color, bordered by yellow and outlined by black for his adornment. Otherwise, one could scarcely tell the kinglets apart. The chickadee. Length 5 to 5.5 inches. About an inch smaller than the English sparrow. Male and female not crested. Crown and nape and throat black. Above gray, slightly tinged with brown. A white space, beginning at the base of the bill, extends backward, widening over cheeks and the upper part of the breast, forming a sort of collar that almost surrounds the neck. Underneath, dirty white, with pale, rusty brown wash on sides. Wings and tail gray with white edgings. Plumage downy. Range, eastern North America, north of the Carolinas to Labrador. Does not migrate in the north. Migrations late September, May, winter resident, permanent resident in northern parts of the United States. Bitterly cold and dreary though the day may be, that little scrap of valor, the chickadee, keeps his spirits high until ours cannot but be cheered by the oft-repeated, clear tinkling silvery notes that spell his name. Chickadee-dee, chickadee-dee, he introduces himself. How easy it would be for everyone to know the birds if all would but sing out their names as clearly as the chickadee and towhee do. No bird except the wren is more cheerful than the chickadee, and his cheerfulness, fortunately, is contagious. None will respond more promptly to your whistle in imitation of his 3 very high, clear call notes, and come nearer and nearer to make quite sure you are only a harmless mimic. He is very inquisitive. Although not a bird may be in sight when you first whistle his call, 9 chances out of 10 there will be a faint echo from some far distant throat before very long, and by repeating the notes at short intervals you will have, probably, not one but several echoes from as many different chickadees whose curiosity to see you soon gets the better of their appetites and brings them flying by easy stages to the tree above your head. Where there is one chickadee, there are apt to be more in the neighborhood, for these social, active, cheerful little black-capped fellows in gray like to hunt for their living in loose, scattered flocks throughout the fall and winter. Their family parties alone are always large. They are wonderfully tame, except the chipping sparrow, perhaps the tamest bird that we have. Patient people who know how to whistle up these friendly sprites can sometimes draw them close enough to touch, and an elect few who have the special gift of winning a wild bird's confidence can induce the chickadee to a flight upon their hands. Blessed with a thick coat of fat under his soft, fluffy gray feathers, a hardy constitution, and a sunny disposition, what terrors has the winter for him? When the thermometer goes down, his spirits seem to go up the higher. Dangling like a circus acrobat on the cone of some tall pine tree, standing on an outstretched twig, then turning over and hanging with his black-capped head downward from the high trapeze, carefully inspecting the rough bark on the twigs for a fat grub or a nest of insect eggs. He is constantly hunting for food and singing grace between bites. His day, 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 sung softly over and over again, seems to be his equivalent for "Give us this day our daily bread." How delightfully he and his busy friends, who are always within call, punctuate the snow-muffled midwinter silence with their ringing calls of good cheer. The orchards where the chickadees, titmice, nuthatches, and kinglets have dined all winter will contain few worm-eaten apples next season. At least one thrifty fruit grower attracts to his trees all the winter birds from far and near by keeping on several shelves nailed up in his orchard strips of suet, cheap raisins, raw peanuts chopped fine, cracked hickory nuts, and rinds of pork. The free lunch counters are freely patronized. There is scarcely an hour in the day, no matter how cold, when some hungry, feathered neighbor may not be seen helping himself to the heating, fattening food he needs to keep his blood warm. At the approach of warm weather, chickadees retreat from public gaze to become temporary recluses in damp, deep woods or woodland swamps where insects are most plentiful. For a few months, they give up their friendly, flocking ways and live in pairs. Long journeys they do not undertake from the north when it is time to nest, but southern birds move northward in the spring. Happily, the chickadee may find a woodpecker's vacant hole in some hollow tree, Worse luck if a new excavation must be made in a decayed birch, the favorite nursery. Wool from the sheep pasture, felt from fern fronds, bits of bark, moss, hair, and the fur of little beast of field and wood, anything soft that may be picked up goes to line the hollow cradle in the tree trunk. How the crowded chickadee babies must swelter in their bed of fur and feathers, tucked inside a close, stuffy hole. The tufted titmouse. Don't expect to meet the tufted titmouse if you live very far north of Washington. He is commonly only in the south and west. This pert and lively cousin of the lovable little chickadee is not quite so friendly and far more noisy. Petto, 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 comes his loud, clear whistle from the woods and clearings where he and his large family are roving restlessly about all through the autumn and winter. A famous musician became insane when he heard one note ringing constantly in his overwrought brain. If you ever hear a troop of titmice whistling petto over and over again for hours at a time, you will pity poor Schumann and fear a similar fate for the birds. But they seem to delight in the two tiresome notes, uttered sometimes in one key, sometimes in another. Another call, day, 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 reminds you of the chickadees, only the tufted titmouse's voice is louder and a little hoarse, as it well might be from such constant use. Few birds that we see about our homes wear a topknot on their heads. The big cardinal has a handsome red one. The larger blue jays is a bluish gray. The cedar waxwings is a Quaker drab. But the little titmouse, which is about the size of an English sparrow, may be named at once by the gray pointed crest that gives him the appearance of being so pert and jaunty. When he hangs head downward from the trapeze on the oak tree, this little gray acrobat's peaked cap seems to be falling off, whereas the black skull cap on the smaller chickadee fits close to the head no matter how much he turns over the bar and dangles underneath it. Neither one of these cousins is a carpenter like the woodpecker. The titmouse has a shorter, stout bill without a chisel on it, which is why it cannot chip out a hole for a nest in a tree trunk or old stump unless the wood is much decayed. This is why these birds are so pleased to find a deserted woodpecker's hole. Not alone are they saved the trouble of making an excavation, but a deep tunnel in a tree trunk means security for their babies against hawks, crows, jays, and other foes, as well as against wind and rain. When we cut down the decayed and hollowed old trees, let us see to it that nesting boxes are provided for the birds that once made their home if we really want them for neighbors. The white-breasted nuthatch, length 5.5 to 6 inches, a trifle smaller than the English sparrow. Male and female, upper parts slate color, top of head and nape black, wings dark slate edged with black that fades to brown, tail feathers brownish black with white bars, sides of head and underneath white, shading to pale reddish under the tail. Female's head leaden, body flat and compact, bill longer than the head. Range: British provinces to Mexico, eastern United States. Migrations: October, April, common resident, most prominent in winter. When it comes to acrobatic performances in the trees, neither the chickadee nor the titmouse can rival their relatives, the little bluish-gray nuthatches. Indeed, any circus might be glad to secure their expert services. Hanging fearlessly from the topmost branches of the tallest pine, running along the underside of horizontal limbs as comfortably as along the top of them, or descending the trunk head foremost, these wonderful little gymnasts keep their nerves as cool as the thermometer in January. From the way they travel over any part of the tree they wish, from top and tip to the bottom of it, no wonder they are sometimes called tree mice. Only the fly that walks across the ceiling, however, can compete with them in clinging to the underside of boughs. Why don't they fall off? If you ever have a chance, examine their claws. These, you will see, are very much curved and have sharp little hooks that catch in any crack or rough place in the bark and easily support the bird's weight. As a general rule, the chickadee keeps to the end of the twigs and the smaller branches. The tufted titmouse rids the larger boughs of insects, eggs, and worms hidden in the scaly bark, but the nuthatches can climb to all but inaccessible places. With the help of the hooks on their toes, it does not matter to them whether they run upward, downward, or sideways, and they can stretch their bodies away from their feet at some very queer angles. Their long bills penetrate into deep holes in the thick bark of the tree trunks and older limbs, and bring forth from their hiding places insects that would escape almost every other bird except the brown creeper and the woodpecker. Of course, when any feathered acrobat is performing in the trees, he is working hard to pick up a dinner, not exercising merely for fun. The red-breasted nuthatch. The most familiar nuthatch in the eastern United States is the one with the white breast, but in the northern states and Canada, there is another common winter neighbor, a smaller, compactly feathered, bluish-gray gymnast with a pale, rusty breast, a conspicuous black line running apparently through his eye from the base of his bill to the nape of his neck, and heavy white eyebrows. This is the hardy little red-breasted nuthatch. His voice is pitched rather high, and his drawling notes seem to come from a lazy bird rather than one of the most vigorous and spry little creatures in the wood. The nasal "onk, onk" of his white-breasted cousin is uttered too without expression, as if the birds were compelled to make a sound once in a while against his will. Both of these cousins have similar habits. Both are a trifle smaller than the English sparrow. In summer, they merely hide away in the woods to nest, for they are not migrants. It is only when nesting duties are over in the autumn that they become neighborly. Who gave them their queer name? A hatchet would be a rather clumsy tool to use in opening a nut, but these birds have a convenient, ever-ready one in their long, stout, sharply pointed bills with which they hack apart the small, thin-shelled nuts like beech nuts and hazelnuts, chinkapins and chestnuts, kernels of corn and sunflower seeds. These they wedge into cracks in the bark just big enough to hold them. During the summer and early autumn, when insects are plentiful, the nuthatches eat little else, and then they thriftily store away the other items on their bill of fare, squirrel fashion, so that when frost kills the insects, they may vary their diet of insect eggs and grubs with nuts and larger grain. Flying to the spot where a nut has been securely wedged, perhaps weeks before, the bird scores and hacks and pecks it open with his sharp little hatchet, whose hard blows may be heard far away.